know, I worked for him.
Sold bananas.
As a 10-year-old kid selling lemons, selling bananas. 11 years old, I was graduated from selling lemons to working selling peaches, cleaning apples. 12 years old, I did that for about 3 or 4 years. And what happened is this allowed her to keep her job in the mill when we were growing up. Now,
So the guy you worked for was essentially a babysitter.
what?
The guy you worked for, selling the lemons, was a babysitter.
Not really, I mean, but, and then what he would do is he'd take off, he'd leave me with the fruit stand, and he'd goof off. He'd go to the beach, he'd do chasing women, all the guys were always chasing women, and he left me there to sell fruit.
When you were 10. When you were 10 years old, you'd be...
No, when I got older.
Oh, okay.
When I started when I was 10.
And that was near
he had
your
me
house?
selling lemons. The place was crowded with people to buy fruits and vegetables. And I'd have 4 lemons and a paper bag, right? 4 for a dime, lemons 4 for a dime, 4 for a dime. And people would buy them and they'd make lemonade.
For a dime? 4 for a dime?
4 for a dime in those days. That's what it was. So they give me a dime, I put the 4 lemon in the bag, give it to him. I go back, give him the dime. He gave me 4 more lemons and another paper bag.
Now, while you were doing that, Mom was working in the store down the street from you, and you didn't know that. You know, she was in Perino's
Oh, I
grocery
didn't
store.
know your mother.
I
then.
know that, but that when you were selling those lemons, Mom was probably selling stuff to people at Perino's grocery store or
Right.
whatever it was down the hill from you, right?
That's right.
She was closer to Providence. She was on LaSalle Square.
That's what she was where 95 crosses now.
Yeah,
Because her grandfather's house was taken over
yeah.
and confiscated.
But you were working up on Di Pasquale Square, on Di
Right.
Pasquale.
That's right.
You know
But
that
what
is?
happened is, after I did that for a while, I got to be 14 years old. Now I was a big kid, you know. I was 14 years old. I could pick up a crate of lemons, put it on my shoulder, walk around and bring it out in front. That weighed 90 pounds. Can you imagine a 14-year-old kid picking up a 90-pound box of lemons and walking around to bring it out in front? Because we had it stacked up behind the stand, but we had to bring them around so we could sell them. And did that. But then in the winter time, it was cold. I worked for them in the winter, all kind of weather. Oh, there were stories that happened there. And you get a lot of street smart, let me tell you. You get street smart. When you grew up in Federal Hill, you had street smart. Well, anyhow,
Why? Why? What was it like there?
well, I mean,
Give him an example, Dad.
well, you knew what was going on.
Okay. You knew that there was other things going on, maybe that were a little shady.
Oh, everything. That's right. You knew all that. But there were kids that they came home from school, and their parents insisted that they learn to play the piano, right? And when they come home from school, they'd have 10 cents. The father would leave them 10 cents, which was a lot. And they'd go to the piano teacher, pay him 10 cents for a piano lesson. He'd go once a week for a piano lesson for 10 cents. We didn't spend 10 cents on piano lessons for me. That's too expensive. But and then every day when they got home from school, instead of going on the push carts, they had to practice the piano. They had to practice the piano for an hour every night.
So tell him about when you went to Menacchio's house. You went to see Tony Menacchio's father.
Yeah,
Would you tell him that story?
yeah. So, what he wants me to tell you, get about street smart, right? Of course, there were, it was after Prohibition. I lived during Prohibition. I can tell you stories about that. But after Prohibition, but still, what people did is they'd make their own booze, but you'd buy the alcohol. You'd buy the alcohol, and then you'd cut it. They cut it, with water. Like you bought a gallon jug of alcohol. That'd burn out your gizzard. So, but if what the people would go, these guys that were connected with the underworld, they sold the alcohol, which was illegal. They shouldn't do that.
Where? Where would this happen? Just all over, or?
No, it was.
At their houses, right?
Yeah, they sold it in their house. So you wanted a jug of alcohol, you have to go over, and you had to know, and somebody had sent you, and you.
Secret knock.
So I remember as a kid, I went with my father. He wanted to get a gallon. He had the money. We had, and he wanted to make cordials. And what they made cordials with it, and so I went with him. He said, "Statacitamo." That means keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything. Just stay with me, right? Statacitamo, don't you? So I walk over, and what you had to do, the guy lived on the first floor. I can visualize the house in there. The Menacchio.
Louis
Menacchio's father. And you go there and you had to knock on the window, on the first window. You knock on it, boom, 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 and you wait. And then you wait a while and you knock again, boom, 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 and you wait. And the next thing you know, a man had come walking out, and he talked with my father in Italian, and he must have told him who he knew or what he was doing and so forth. And he told him he wanted a jug, and they were peddling this alcohol. And I said, okay. So he told my father how much money he wanted, so he gave it to him. He says, okay, he says, you wait, walk around and come back here in 10 minutes. We walked around, waited outside the door, went back the next time, boom, 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 knocked on the window. The next thing I knew, the man had come walking out, and he had a paper bag in his arm like this, and he'd give it to my father. He says, buonasera, and we'd walk away, and he had the jug of the alcohol.
What they would pour in it. Tell them what they pour in the alcohol.
Well, you cut it with water.
Yeah.
You cut it. You couldn't make it straight. That was
100% proof. That was 100% proof is 50%, right?
Yeah.
100 proof is 50%.
100 proof is 50%
water.
No, 50% alcohol. But this must have been 80% alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was 100%, but I think it was about 80%. And you'd cut it down. You go home and they'd have smaller bottles. Now, if you went to the pharmacies, there were pharmacies that would sell you the flavoring, and the flavoring came in little bottles. That was not illegal. The flavorings you could buy because they didn't contain alcohol. But what they did, they buy various flavors, and then they'd go home and cut it, and they'd put the flavoring in it, shake it up, seal it up, and then you could taste it. They used to make one was very popular. They called Strega. It was called Strega, and it was like a yellow, and it was a little tot, and you serve that like an after dinner drink, a little. They give you a little whiskey glass this big and save you some Strega. Buona salute, we're drinking Strega. And another one that they liked was what they called Coffee Sport. They used to call it Coffee Sport. And what they would do is make it with the alcohol, but they had the coffee flavoring they put with it. It wasn't regular coffee, but it tasted like it, right? And they used to call that Coffee Sport. The women liked that. The women liked the Coffee Sport.
Did your parents speak English?
Who?
Your parents.
Oh, they finally started to learn. My mother learned before my father. And I taught my mother to read I taught my mother to read, and she got to the point where she could read. She loved to read Dorothy Dix, which was like who writes for the Lovelorn now?
Ann Landers.
Who?
Ann Landers.
Ann Landers or one of those. But in those days it was a Dorothy Dix. And whenever she got her hands on a newspaper, she worked in the mill, and sometimes the people would have, she wouldn't buy the newspaper, that cost 2 cents. The Providence Journal cost 2 cents. But people would leave the newspaper in the mill. She'd pick it up, take it home with her. And then now I'm in the 5th, 6th, 7th grade. And so she'd say to me, she'd ask me to read the captions on the pictures, because she could see the pictures, and I'd read the caption to her, and I'd explain what it was. And then she started to learn. And then she'd have me read Dorothy Dix, and she would read it, but she didn't read go well. But she learned. And I would read Dorothy Dix, and I'd tell her in Italian what it was, and then I'd read the response, and I'd tell her. And she learned with reading Dorothy Dix and reading the captions on the newspapers. She learned pretty good. The one thing that she did first, the thing she did first was not so much, thank you, not so much the Dorothy Dix and stuff, but, my mother and father were proud of something. They both went to school in Italy, so they could write their name. Thank you, Bob. They could write their name, and but they could write, and my father would write to his father. My father was proud. He says, "Hanno fatto la seconda classe." He graduated from the 2nd grade in Italy. If you graduated from the 2nd grade in Italy, that was good. Most of them never went to school. They never got out of the fields. But by going to the 2nd grade in Italy, they learned how to write their name.
Which is important.
And they could do a little bit of adding numbers. They could add some numbers.
1 or 2 suckers.
Let me taste it. Bob.
I'm gonna steer. Wait.
Thank you. I want another sugar.
Okay.
What one of these? Blue ones. The blue one. But both of them had been to the 2nd grade. La seconda classe. And they were proud that they could sign their names. Can I digress and tell you a funny story?
Definitely.
No?
Yeah.
My mother worked in the Atlantic mills, and they were starting to get, the mills were starting to get business systems in. They were advancing with the times. In those days, when you worked on the end of the week, the man would come in, and his job, they called him the paymaster. He would come in, the paymaster, and you'd line up, and he'd go up to him, and he would give you your week's pay. He had the information, and you came in, identified who you were, and they'd give you your week's pay and put it in a little envelope, actual cash. He was called the paymaster. They did away with that, right? So when they were doing away with the paymaster, people come in and they got them where they started to give them checks, and you got your paycheck. And when you got your paycheck, they didn't need the paymaster. And what they would do, they'd deliver the checks to the department where you worked. And there was always one woman in the whole department that did all the bookkeeping and all the other paperwork for the whole department. and she was in the office. She worked in the office, boy. That was a big job.